Hi, everyone, welcome. I'm Helen, and before I begin, I want to thank you for being here with me today. If you're new, please hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to me and helps me keep telling real, human stories like this one. And while you're here, drop a comment to tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing our little global circle grow. Say hello, share your own experiences with love, betrayal, healing, anything you're willing to put into words. I'll be in the comments, replying, listening, and saying hello right back to each of you. Alright. Deep breath. Here we go. This is the story of how my life split open in white lace and candlelight, how I learned the truth about the two men who were supposed to love me best, my father and my fiance, and how I turned a wedding into a reckoning. My name is Helen, I'm 44, and this is how I took back my voice. There is a certain kind of happiness that arrives so gently you don't notice its weight until it's gone. Mine wore a terracotta cardigan and smelled like eucalyptus and baking bread. My mornings began at 5:45 a.m., the kettle singing, the cat doing a figure 8 around my ankles, sunlight combing the edges of the kitchen in pale gold. I am a therapist by trade, the daughter of a high school literature teacher turned small-town councilman, and the sort of woman who arranges tulips at an angle because straight lines can feel like orders. I met Evan at a fundraiser for the community garden. He was all benevolent angles, jawline like integrity, smile like the start of spring. He asked me if I preferred rosemary or thyme while we stood making tiny conversational salads near the basil. I said rosemary, of course. He said thyme, of course. We laughed like the oldest joke in the world had just learned to walk. He was 36, 8 years younger than me, a structural engineer who used the words load path in normal conversation and made them sound romantic. He listened, with his eyes, with that quiet tilt of the head that told me he was collecting my words like shells from a beach. I don't fall easily. I did with him. My father, Alan, adored him. A practical man, Dad said, clapping him on the shoulder. Dad loved practical things, corduroy, grocery lists, Shakespeare's meter. He taught me to identify constellations and never leave a room without turning off the light. After my mother died, he learned to make omelets and cried into the dishwater when he thought I was out on a run. I wanted a family again. I didn't know I would have to redefine the word family before I could keep it. Evan proposed in late May. We were in our backyard, the maple tree hemming the day in birdsong. He'd strung a thread of fairy lights like a constellation and dropped to one knee on the brick path I'd set with my own hands. His ring was simple, an oval sapphire circled by tiny diamonds, a sky with its small stars. You make me feel like home, he said, voice steady, eyes bright. Marry me? I said yes with my whole mouth and both hands, a laugh breaking out of me like I was shattering into joy. He lifted me, spun me once, and I felt the years I had walked alone peeling off me like old paint. The next weeks were a collage, fabric swatches, tasting menus, a binder thick with ideas. I am not a woman for princess dresses. I chose a gown like a poem, soft, lucid, falling in a line that suggested I might be made of water. We picked a venue with a long aisle that remembered footsteps and windows that believed in autumn light. We planned for vows we wrote ourselves, because we were adults with our own words and we trusted them. Dad was giddy. He built a wooden arch for us, cedar, raw and honest, its grain like lines in a palm. He asked if I wanted his old record player at the reception. You could dance to your mother's favorite song, he said, and for a moment she was in the room, half laughing, pushing up her glasses with the back of her wrist. I watched the two of them talking on the porch one evening. My father and my fiance, saw the way men bond when they think they're building something that will outlast them. I felt lucky in a way that made me scared to touch anything, as if the spell would notice. Not all cracks announce themselves with a sound. Some arrive as a shadow where there shouldn't be one. At first, it was nothing, Evan's phone, face down more often than usual. My therapist brain offered a buffet of rational possibilities. Work stress, surprise wedding plans, a private conversation with his mother. I ate them like candy. He came home late twice, once with a story about a bridge inspection out by the river, once with a grease stain on his cuff that did not smell like bridges or rivers. He was affectionate, conscientious, present. The grease was perhaps from the machine shop at his firm. I made a list of plausible greases. Then he started jogging with someone on Saturday mornings. Old college friend, he said, tying his shoes, smile easy, body looser than it used to be. He didn't invite me. I don't like running, to be fair, but I like being invited. The friend's name never came up in specifics. They're going through something, he said once, mouth half full of banana. I'm just listening. Listening is a holy verb. I respected it. But something in me, a cautious crow, tilted its head and took a step back. One evening, I found him on the porch with my father, two silhouettes folded into the twilight, speaking low. When I slid open the door, both of them startled in the way people do when they are picking up a conversation and putting it in their pocket. We were just talking about speeches, Dad said quickly. I don't want to go on too long, you know how I can be. You'll be perfect, I said. It is possible to be both sincere and wrong at the same time. The disaster did not arrive at night, as I'd always assumed disasters would. It came one bright morning in August, when the kitchen smelled like toast and the cat was kneading the window seat like a small baker. Evan left his laptop open on the dining table. I am not a snoop, I keep my hands to myself even when I have questions. But a calendar notification popped up and it was like a shelf collapsed inside me. Meet, a.m. at the park, 9 a.m. The initials were not revelatory on their own. There are many AMS in the world. But the park was not near his office. It was 2 blocks from my father's house. AM could be anyone, Aaron Miller, April Mendez, Aunt Mabel. My mind performed a gallop through the telephone directory of the universe. I told myself nothing. I made tea. I cleaned the sink. At 8:50, I told myself I was going for a walk. I do not like to spy. I am not proud of this part. I am telling you anyway because secrets grow in proud soil. The park is a green bowl. Children were squealing at the splash pad, dogs tugging their people, the benches blinking in the sun like old turtles. I waited by the sycamore near the west entrance, heart scrabbling like a trapped bird. At 9:02, I saw Evan. He wore the hoodie I slept in sometimes, eyes hidden behind sunglasses. He sat on the bench by the chess tables, the kind with squares burned into the wood. At 9:05, my father walked up. I didn't think of myself as a woman prone to fainting, but the world did a dim trick. I held to the tree. Dad sat beside Evan. They didn't hug, not exactly. There was a stilted space between them that made me think of a bridge that hadn't been calibrated to hold the weight it was carrying. My brain sprinted. Parent-teacher advisory things? Wedding budgets? An argument about something banal like cufflinks? I stepped closer, the sycamore bark rough against my palm. I could not hear their words. I saw Evan's hand move, palm open, pleading. I saw my father's jaw. It did a thing I remembered from my childhood when he had told me he could not fix what needed fixing. It clenched, released, clenched again, like he was trying to chew his guilt into something swallowable. They talked for 20 minutes. No touching beyond a brief hand on the bench. No embraces. When they parted, they went opposite directions and neither looked back. I leaned my forehead against the tree and felt something tear gently, like silk. There are many ways to ruin yourself. One is to ask a question you are not ready to hear answered. Another is to invite an answer without the question. I did both. That evening, I was setting the table when Dad rang the bell. Brought the draft of my speech, he said, holding up a neatly folded manuscript. He smelled like sawdust and the cheap citrus hand soap from his workshop. Wanted to run it by you. Evan was in the shower. The water was loud, a curtain of privacy. I poured my father tea and tried to stapler my smile to my face. I do not do well with delayed pain. I prefer to rip off bandages with both hands. Dad, I said, and my voice was a room I did not recognize. Were you with Evan this morning? He flinched. It was small, like a candle in wind, but I saw it. Yes, he said. He put the mug down on the coaster with a care that offended me. We were discussing something he wanted to run by me. Wedding related. What was it? He looked at me then with a gaze I had not seen since I was 9 and had come home with a scraped knee and a lie. Gentle, pained, ancient. I don't think it's mine to say. I felt the salt climb into my throat. Then I'll ask him, I said, and called down the hall like a mother calls a child for dinner. Evan. Can you come here a minute? He emerged damp and startled, hair combed up like a question, towel looped low on his hips. He saw my father at the table, took in the stillness, and the color seeped out of his face. We're doing this? He asked, almost to himself. Yes, I said, because there are moments when truth is not a polite guest you announce. It kicks the door in. We are doing this now. They looked at each other, then at me, and in that triangle I saw the architecture of my life listing away from square. I'm so sorry, Evan said, and I did not yet know which way to run with that sentence, toward him with forgiveness or away from him with my keys. For what? I asked, and my voice broke on the what. He sat down. The towel was obscene now in the ordinary light of our dining room. Before I met you, years ago, he said, I had a relationship with your father. I have trained for grief, I have trained for other people's grief with my whole adult life. There is no training for this. A what? I said, so softly that I did not know if I was the one who spoke. I looked at my father, whose fingertips were pressed to his own temples like he was trying to keep his skull on straight. A relationship, Evan repeated, and the word was too big to fit in the room. It was brief. It was during a very confused time in my life. In both of our lives. He reached for my hand and then withdrew, as if touching me would burn him. We ended it. We ended it years ago. I turned to my father. He nodded once. It was wrong, he said. I was your father. I was married then. And I was ashamed. I had been afraid to tell you anything because I did not know how to tell you this without losing you. His voice cracked on losing. My first thought, hideous and instinctual, was how old was he? The answer was just past 30. My father had been 57. My mother had been alive. A sound came out of me that I did not know the human body could make. The room's corners rushed away from each other. I stood up so fast the chair skidded back and kissed the wall with a thud. You knew, I said to both of them. You knew before you proposed to me, I said to Evan. You knew before you agreed to walk me down an aisle, I said to my father. The words blistered as they left my mouth. And neither of you thought I should know? We thought it was over, Evan said helplessly. We thought it had nothing to do with us. Everything we are is what we've done, I said. Everything. I told them to leave. I did not shout. It is possible to be volcanic without noise. You simply turn the gravity up inside your own body and everything falls away from you. They went. For 3 days I did not answer the phone. The cat became my priest. I lay on the living room floor and stared at the ceiling fan and I tried to index the lies, the mornings, the laughter, the porch conversations, the delicate choreography of keeping me out of a truth that would kill me. I slept at noon. I woke at 3 a.m. I ate cereal and could not taste it. My father left letters in my mailbox, his handwriting a fragile archipelago, ink sinking into the paper like it understood the weight of it. Evan texted paragraphs that began with I need you to hear me and ended with I will wait. In the middle of the third night, I went to the cedar arch in Dad's workshop. It was half-sanded, smelling like a forest turning into a door. I ran my fingers along the grain and thought of all the rituals we invent to make betrayal polite. By the 5th day, I was a person again. Anger is an energy asks to be used. I brushed my hair. I washed my face. I put on a dress the color of a bruise. I made a list of questions and then I made a plan. Forgiveness and revenge are cousins. Both look like motion. One returns you to yourself. The other builds a theater so you can hear the truth out loud. I didn't know then which one I would choose in the end. I just knew I would not be silent in a white dress. Here's what I decided: I would not cancel the wedding. I would stage it. Not the marriage, God, no. The ceremony. The liturgy of it. The gathering of family and friends who had sent gifts and booked flights and learned how to pronounce charcuterie. I would give them a story because I had lived inside a lie and I needed it to be sunlight. I needed witnesses. I needed the truth to sit in a chair and be looked at. Here's what else I decided: I would not be cruel. Revenge is a kind of fire. I wanted heat, but not a house burned down so completely that there was nothing left to rebuild from. I still loved my father. I still, God help me, loved Evan, or at least the idea of him I had lived with. The part of me that had spent 2 decades walking other people through their wreckage knew that humiliation is not a ladder. It is a hole. So I designed a ceremony that would tell the truth without setting the world on fire. I called our officiant, Mia, a friend who had become a judge because she believed the law was a way to listen better, and I told her I was changing the program. I asked for an extra microphone. I asked for a projector. I asked for patience. At the rehearsal dinner, I smiled and passed the roasted carrots and watched my father pour wine into Evan's glass with the care of a man refilling a candle. They looked like grief dressed as etiquette. I wore a bracelet of small pearls that had belonged to my mother and I touched it like a rosary. The morning of the wedding was a clear sheet of music. The sky did what skies do when they're trying their best: blue, wide, honest. I got ready in the green room with my bridesmaids, 2 women I have loved since the Clinton administration, and we made dumb jokes and cried like humans doing plumbing. I slipped into the gown. It felt like a soft exoskeleton. My hands did not shake. Before the ceremony, I asked to see my father. He came in like a man prepared to be refused. His tie was crooked. He has never been able to tie one right. I fixed it, my fingers doing the old remembered dance. Dad, I said, looking at the center of his face so I would not lose my nerve. Today is not going to go how you expect. But it is not going to be a slaughter. I need you to trust me. He nodded, throat working. I trust you with my life, he said. I'm sorry I didn't trust you with the truth. Me too, I said, and the words were big enough to bruise us both. I asked to see Evan. He came in like a man walking into his own sentencing. He had shaved too close and there was a nick on his jaw. I loved the silliness of that imperfection so much that for a second I hated him more. Evan, I said, and my voice was steady like a beam. I need you to listen. I am not marrying you today. But I am going to ask you to stand up there with me and tell the truth, and I am going to tell mine, and then we are going to walk out of that room as the people we actually are. He paled. You're going to tell them? I'm going to tell me, I said. In front of them. Because I've been told lies in private and I need the truth to have a crowd. He nodded, hands shaking. I deserve worse. Maybe, I said. But you will not get worse from me. The music began. Not the song we had planned but my mother's favorite, At Last, because an ending can be a kind of arrival. I walked down the aisle alone, not because I had no one to escort me, but because I needed to feel the weight of my own feet. The guests turned, a rustle of hope, then confusion. The cedar arch waited at the altar like an apology. Mia's eyes found mine. She is a woman who can hold a room like a bowl. She welcomed everyone, thanked them for traveling, made a joke about the weather. People laughed, the fragile sound of relief. Then she said, calmly, this ceremony will be a little different. Today, Helen will begin with a story. I took the microphone. My heart was steady. I looked out and saw my life. Co-workers, neighbors, cousins, my father's old colleagues with their tweed jackets and opinions, Evan's sister with her impatient kindness, the couple from the garden fundraiser, the barista who always slipped me an extra espresso shot when I looked tired. The people who would have danced us into a future. The people who would see me choose a different door. "Hi," I said, and my voice was my own. "Thank you for being here. Thank you for seeing me." I told them who I am, a woman who loves rosemary, who believes in small kindnesses, who has walked other people through the fire and learned that sometimes you have to stand inside it yourself to know what burns. I told them about love, the kind we build intentionally and the kind that confuses us, the kind we hide from ourselves and the kind that registers in the body before the mind can explain it. I did not say the word slept with, I did not need to. I said relationship and years ago and while my mother was alive and I did not know. The room shifted, a communal intake of breath. You can feel a collective heartbeat if you've trained your attention to it. Years of therapy rooms taught me the skill, heartbreak taught me the frequency. I turned to my father. "I love you," I said to him, and meant it. "You failed my mother and you failed me. You have also been the man who read me The Tempest on the porch while mosquitoes practiced percussion on our ankles. You taught me how to plant tulips. You taught me to apologize when the apology is more important than the pride." He was weeping without sound, the way men his age learn to. "I am asking you to choose the version of yourself you have been in your best hours." I turned to Evan. "I love the man you were with me. I don't know if he's the same man you were with my father. I know you asked me to build a home with you on top of a fault line. I won't do it. But I won't kill the part of me that believed in you." He nodded, chest shaking. Then I did what no wedding ceremony has ever asked a bride to do in the first 10 minutes. I invited them, my father and Evan, to speak. Evan took the microphone as if it were made of bees. He cleared his throat. "I am not going to make excuses," he said. "I was lost. I was selfish. I was also a younger man looking for a father in the wrong places. I met Alan at a lecture he gave on ethics and public service," he added, and a ripple of bitter laughter began and then died politely. We became friends. It became more. I ended it when I realized I was hurting people I had never met. I never told Helen because I wanted to be someone else when I was with her. But you can't be someone else, not really. It catches up. He looked at me then with all the love and all the regret I have ever seen in one face. "I am sorry." He handed the microphone to my father like the hottest object on earth. Dad held it, turned it in his hands as if it might reveal a better option. "I have spent my life teaching other people's children how to read the right books," he said, voice thin. "I have not always read my own life correctly." A sad little laugh. "I was weak. I was vain. I was lonely and I made that loneliness into a justification to do harm." He lifted his eyes and looked at the room. "To those of you who knew my wife, my Susan, I failed her. To those of you who know my daughter, my Helen, I failed her. I have been trying to live my apology, and I will keep trying." He looked at me, and for the first time since I was a little girl, I saw fear in his eyes. Not of me. Of what he had made of his life. "If you can find a way to forgive me, I will spend whatever days I have left making it worth your effort." The room held us. No one moved. Somewhere in the back, a child asked a question her mother shushed. The air was made of pins and mercy. I took the microphone back. "Thank you," I said. "Now it's my turn." I reached into the small satin pouch I had sewn into the inside of my gown, a seamstress's secret weapon. I pulled out a folded sheet of paper, the vows I had written when I still thought vows were what you say to another person. I unfolded them and began to read. But I read them to myself. "I vow," I said, and my voice did not tremble, "to choose the truth even when it costs me the future I thought I wanted. I vow to guard my tenderness with a fierceness worthy of it. I vow to love the child I used to be, who watched adults make small, complicated messes and learned to be polite about them. I vow to keep listening, but to stop pretending that silence is a respectable answer. I vow to build a home where the floors are level because the history is honest." I folded the paper. "I do," I said. "To me." And then I looked at the officiant and nodded. Mia stepped forward as if she had rehearsed this all her life. "Friends," she said, "today is a ceremony, not of marriage, but of integrity. We honor Helen's vows to herself. We bless the courage it takes to tell the truth. We release the plans we brought into this room and accept the life that is actually here. I could feel the room breathe again, a long exhale through many bodies. Someone started to clap and then everyone did. Not thunder. Not confetti. Just a clean, human sound that said, "We see it. It happened. We are here." We did not have a first kiss. We had a first vow. I bowed to them, my people. I bowed to the cedar arch. I bowed to the small girl inside me who wanted to be chosen and realized, in the bright rectangle of that moment, that she could choose herself. The reception had been catered and paid for. I had not the heart to send everyone home. So we ate. We danced. Not because this was a party, but because bodies need motion after a shock. I danced with my best friend as if we were at prom and needed to forget the faces of boys. I danced with my father once, one song, the slow English ballad my mother liked, and we cried publicly, which is our family's new hobby. Evan hovered at the edge of the room like a man whose passport has been confiscated. I saw him speaking to his sister, to our officiant, to my father out on the patio. I did not go to him. If love is a muscle, mine had torn and would need time to knit. At some point, I escaped to the bathroom and sat on the closed lid of the toilet and let my dress collapse around me like a tent. There is a particular species of exhaustion that only the truth can bring. I texted my therapist, yes, the therapist has a therapist, and typed, "Done it. Still alive." She replied with a single heart and a sentence I have written on a note card since, "Clean pain is heavy, dirty pain is sticky." You chose heavy. On the way out of the venue, I carried my bouquet to the edge of the garden and left it there, not as a symbol for anyone else but as a breadcrumb for myself. I would be back, to retrieve whatever still belonged to me. The day after, my house smelled like flowers and endings. I returned the rented champagne flutes, unplugged the string lights, fed the cat, and slept in every room like a pilgrim. Messages poured in, blessings, outrage, whispers, confessions. You would be stunned how many people have been holding the edges of complicated loves for years with the muscle of their jaw. My father came by and asked if he could fix the cabinet door that has always hung crooked. I let him. Because sometimes the repair you allow is not the one you need, but it is a practice. He worked quietly, hands sure, and then he looked at me like a student asking if the exam was actually over. I don't know what our relationship will look like, I told him. But I want there to be one. If you can do it honestly. I can try, he said. Try better than you did at this, I said, not unkindly. He nodded, penitent and also still himself. It took me longer to call Evan. When I did, I asked to meet at the place with the rosemary fries, because pettiness is not the opposite of dignity. We sat across from each other like survivors of unrelated shipwrecks who had drifted to the same island. I loved you, he said first. I still do. I believe you, I said. But I love me more. He swallowed. Does that mean never? It means not now. It means not like this. I leaned in, elbows on the table. It means if you want to be the kind of man who deserves the kind of love I know how to give, you will have to do the kind of work that changes where you look for fathers. He flinched, then nodded. I will. I hope you do, I said, and I meant it, which felt both noble and inconvenient. We hugged in the parking lot, a new kind of hug, the kind that acknowledges both the miracle that you existed for each other and the fact that you will not again. I couldn't look at the cedar arch without tasting smoke. It leaned in my father's workshop like a sentence missing its verb. One afternoon, I drove over unannounced and stood in front of it. Let's finish it, I said when Dad came in, wiping his hands on an old towel. Finish it for what? He asked gently. For something else, I said. A public thing. A place where people can say the truths they are afraid to say at home. He understood. We sanded it together. We applied the oil with rags. The wood drank it greedily, the grain rising like a history you can finally feel. We loaded it into his truck and took it to the community garden, the place I had met Evan, because humility is different from erasure. We installed it at the entrance. We affixed a small brass plaque that read, "The Arch of Saying It. For vows to the self, for confessions, for beginnings. Donated by H&A in honor of S." People started using it the very next day. A teenager read a poem under it. A woman in a red coat proposed to herself under it, slid a ring onto her own finger, and laughed like she'd been rescued. Sometimes, on Saturdays, I saw my father sitting on the bench nearby, not telling anyone what to do, just existing within range of their courage. It was the most decent thing I had seen him do in years. There are letters we write only to make our hands remember how to move. I wrote one to my mother. "Dear Mom, today I told the truth where everyone could hear it. I wish you'd been there. I think you would have approved of my dress." I wrote one to the girl I was at 19, who had stayed too long with a man because he cried pretty. "Dear me, we are not a towel. You do not have to be wrung out to be useful." I wrote one to Evan. I didn't send it. It said, "You were the right lesson. Thank you for showing me that my love is not a resource for unresolved boys. Thank you for teaching me the sound a lie makes when it thinks it is a promise." I wrote one to my father. I did send it. It said, "You cannot go back and be who you needed to be then. But you can be him now. I am watching." That is what daughters do when they decide not to leave. They become witnesses, not juries. He called me from his porch. "I am here," he said simply. Sometimes that is all a man can manage, and sometimes it is enough for the day. Several months after the not wedding, I received a message from a woman named Lydia. She was my mother's friend from graduate school, a historian who had emigrated to Portugal and never learned to reduce her emails to an American length. She said she had been sorting through old letters and found one from my mother, dated the summer before I was born. In it, my mother spoke about a man she had loved before she met my father, a man she had considered leaving with. "He made me feel like music," she'd written. But I realized I wanted to be the instrument, not the song. She chose my father, knowing he was steadier, less molten, more likely to be the person beside her when the sink broke. Love is often a negotiation between poems and plumbing. The twist was not that my mother had been complicated. The twist was that she had been honest with her friend about her complexity, and that honesty had made her choice more meaningful, not less. I had been making a religion out of flawless decisions. My mother had known better. The real moral was never purity, it was declaration. I drove to the ocean after I read it, parked, and let the wind rearrange my hair and my mind. We do not betray love by acknowledging our own unsteadiness. We betray it by pretending we are not unsteady and then building houses on the lie. My mother's letter forgave me for not being the unblemished woman I had thought I needed to be. It also complicated my anger at my father in a way that was not convenient but was true. Life is a series of scales that never quite balance, and we live anyway. Healing is tedious. We love the cinematic arc, the massive speech, the ceremonial bow. After that comes laundry. After that comes paying the water bill and buying cat litter and remembering to eat. I made routines like nets. I ran in the park where I had watched my father and Evan sit on a bench and rearranged my breath until it belonged to me again. I learned pottery. There is something about spinning a lump of earth into a bowl that holds soup that makes you feel like a god with a day job. I doubled down on my practice, and when clients sat on my couch and confessed that they had done or survived unpretty things, I nodded with a new sobriety and a new kindness. I started seeing someone. I didn't plan to. He's a nurse named Marco who knows how to hold the heaviest part without pretending it isn't heavy. He makes a perfect omelet and leaves the pan clean for the next person. When I told him the wedding story, he did not inch away. He leaned forward and asked what my mother's favorite song had sounded like at the ceremony. The right questions are more romantic than the right cheekbones. This is not a love story about him. It is a love story about becoming someone who could answer the right questions. My father began going to therapy. He told me this in a text because men of his generation sometimes need their thumbs to confess. He joined an accountability group where retired teachers drink black coffee and attempt radical honesty on folding chairs. He started volunteering at a youth center, tutoring for the GED. He did not become a saint. He became a man who understands the cost of the ache he put in other people's bones and pays interest. One evening, we sat on his porch. He had made chamomile tea that tasted like well-behaved flowers. "Do you think your mother would forgive me?" he asked, staring out at the small maple that refuses to admit it is old. "I think she would make you work for it," I said. "And I think she would like that you are working." He nodded, jaw soft. "I keep thinking about the day of the ceremony," he said. For the first time in my life, the truth didn't feel like a weapon. It felt like a floor. I reached for his hand. "That's because we laid it together. If you are listening to this, it is possible you know the shape of a secret. Perhaps you are holding one for someone else and it's turning heavy in your arms. Perhaps you are hiding one inside your own mouth and it's making every word taste like metal. I want to tell you something I learned in white silk under cedar. You do not owe anyone your silence. You do not owe anyone your humiliation, either. You owe the truth a room. Maybe it is a small room, with only one other person in it, and a window cracked. Maybe it is a hall with fairy lights and a rented arch and your entire history wearing good shoes. But the truth deserves chairs. It deserves air. And when you give it those, it will give you back your breath. Turn ceremonies into reckonings when you need to. Turn reckonings into rituals when you're ready. Make new arches. Write vows to yourself and say "I do" in the mirror if you must. Forgive with boundaries. Love with proof. Choose your pain, the clean kind that moves, not the sticky kind that repeats. A year later, on the anniversary of the day I did not marry, we held a small event at the community garden under the cedar arch. We called it the saying. People brought their unsaid sentences wrapped in napkins. One by one, they stood under the arch and spoke, "I'm leaving. I'm staying. I love him. I don't want children. I forgave her. I can't yet." Each declaration fell into the soil like a seed. When it was my turn, I said this: "I once believed that betrayal meant the end of a story. It turns out it was just the comma before the part where I started using my real voice." My father, one step behind the crowd, put his hand over his heart. "Not a promise. A placement." I nodded back. The truth between us had learned to walk without limping. Afterward, we ate lemon bars and someone played a fiddle and a child tried to crawl into the rosemary bush and was saved, mildly scolded, and kissed. I took a piece of chalk and wrote on the path, "Start here." A man I did not know added an arrow and the words "or here." We laughed. That's the point, after all. There isn't only one entrance to yourself. People ask what I kept from the wedding. The dress? No. I gave it to a charity that offers gowns to women who want to make promises without going into debt for them. The ring? I returned it. The vows? I kept them. I keep revising them, actually. They are a living document. I vow to tell the truth to myself first. I vow to leave rooms that shrink me. I vow to stay where repair is mutual and measurable. I vow to love in the daylight. I vow to stop apologizing for being a grown woman with standards that make the right people sigh with relief. Sometimes, on quiet Sundays, I run into Evan in the city. He looks well. He started a mentorship program for young engineers who don't have fathers, which is either ironic or perfect, depending on your mood. We nod at each other, a real nod, the kind you give a former version of your own life. We do not need to speak. The truth already did it. I still wear my mother's bracelet. I still burn rosemary on the stove when the house feels like it needs reminding. Marco stays over sometimes. He takes out the trash without asking because love is also trash taken out and dishes done without ceremony. And my father calls me every Thursday at 7 p.m. to ask about my day. Sometimes we talk for 5 minutes. Sometimes for 50. We do not revisit the wound every time, we simply live near it without tripping. That is its own miracle. Thank you for staying with me through all of this, for letting me unfold the day my life changed and then kept going. If you've listened this far, I hope you feel a little less alone, a little more brave, maybe even a little lighter. If you've got a story or a secret you're ready to say out loud, tell me in the comments, or tell me where you're listening from today. I'll be there, reading, saying hello across the miles, appreciating each of you. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel. It helps me keep creating these long, honest stories about the beautiful, messy ways we survive each other and ourselves. I'm Helen. I chose the truth. I choose it again tomorrow. I hope, in whatever way you can, you do too.